"Hey, how is it going?" At the New York airport, the university student Chloe calls her mom, Irene, to let her know she arrived home and discovers that her dad's birthday party was cancelled because he was called to work at the last minute. As her dad is a pilot, Chloe decides to stay at the airport to meet him. Meanwhile, TV reporter Cameron is approached by a Christian lady who tries to convince him to accept Jesus, saying that all the tragedies he sees at work can be explained by the Bible. Chloe interrupts the woman, saying that God is punishing innocent people for the sins of the past and that acting in mysterious ways is no excuse. The lady goes away and Cameron thanks Chloe for helping him. Chloe then comments that her mom is also a religious fanatic. In the parking lot, Chloe's dad, Rayford, takes off his wedding ring before meeting the flight attendant, Hattie. Upon entering the airport, Rayford sees Chloe and runs to hug her. However, Chloe isn't happy as she realized he was flirting with the flight attendant and confronts him since her parents have been facing problems in their marriage for a while. Rayford explains that they got married very young and that people change with the passing of the years. Since Irene became obsessed with religion, living with her has become impossible. Realizing that her dad isn't wearing his wedding ring, Chloe suspects that he accepted this job today to be with Hattie. Rayford ignores the comment and hands the car keys to her before leaving. After that, Chloe agrees to have a coffee with Cameron and they talk about how people are crazy for thanking God for tragedies. The conversation is interrupted when an employee hands Chloe 2 tickets for a U2 concert in London, which her dad took 2 weeks to get. This proves that Rayford's trip was planned in advance and that he wasn't called at the last minute. Frustrated, Chloe hands the tickets to Cameron and asks him to deliver them to her dad. While Cameron and Rayford board the plane, Chloe goes to her dad's car and finds his wedding ring. Upon arriving home, she greets her brother Rami and then sits down to talk with her mom. In the beginning, the chat is friendly, but when Chloe mentions what happened at the airport, the conversation gets tense. Irene starts preaching, which irritates Chloe, who decides to leave. Needing a distraction, Chloe goes to the shopping mall with Rami. The boy is worried about his parents, but Chloe guarantees that everything will be okay, and the two of them hug. Suddenly, a flash appears, and Chloe realizes she is holding only Rami's clothes because he disappeared. Around her, several people realize their loved ones have vanished. As the panic spreads, a driverless car loses control and crashes right into the mall. Chloe looks inside the vehicle and finds a dead passenger. Soon, some people start to loot stores and the purses of the disappeared. Outside, a huge traffic jam blocks the streets. On Rayford's flight, some passengers try to make conversation, but others prefer to be left alone. When the plane stabilizes, Rayford discreetly leaves the cockpit to meet with Hattie and show her the tickets Cameron delivered. Suddenly, the plane starts to shake, and everyone realizes that several passengers have disappeared. Panic sets in while the aircraft loses altitude. Rayford runs back to the cockpit and discovers that his co-pilot has vanished. He immediately takes control to stabilize the plane. Cameron starts to record everything while the passengers go crazy. They start to punch the cockpit door, demanding to speak with the captain. Hattie tries to calm the situation, but she can't. Cameron tries to help her, but also without success. Seeing the confusion through the cameras, Rayford increases the pressure inside the cabin, making the oxygen masks fall. With difficulty breathing, the passengers have no choice but to return to their seats and use the masks. Next, Rayford tries to use the radio to ask for help, but no one answers. He also tries to use his cell phone, but discovers the device isn't working. As soon as everyone calms down, Rayford normalizes the cabin pressure and goes to speak with the passengers, using a tone of authority to make them remain in their seats. He reminds everyone that panic is the worst enemy at the moment, so they need to stay calm until they can get more information. After that, Hattie realizes that her fellow flight attendant has also disappeared and runs to the cockpit to ask Rayford for support, as she is having an emotional breakdown. As everyone is leaving their seats anyway, Cameron goes back to recording. He starts to interview the passengers. No one saw anything strange, and the disappearances happened instantly, leaving behind only the people's clothes. A desperate woman runs to the washroom to consume a bit of happiness powder and comes back saying she knows none of this is real. Cameron tells her to go to sleep and realizes she wrote "not real" on her own hand. A Muslim man thinks everyone should be praying, but another passenger disagrees, saying they have different gods. Before the argument gets worse, Rayford announces that he is returning to New York. At the mall, Chloe manages to make her way through the crowd, pushing and struggling to move forward. She runs to the parking lot to continue looking for Raimi, but needs to get out of there fast when a small plane falls out of nowhere and destroys Rayford's car. With no choice, she starts to walk on foot, and when two bikers pass by, they steal her brother's backpack. At that instant, an accident happens on the bridge and a school bus falls into the river. Chloe runs to help the passengers, but discovers the bus is empty. Soon, she arrives at the city center and tries to call home, but nobody answers. Cars crash into one another and an ambulance appears to rescue the injured. Chloe runs over there, thinking Raimi could be one of the victims, but the police officers push her away. As she continues walking through the city, the glass doors of a jewelry store suddenly explode and a dead thief is thrown outside. The store employee comes out armed and points the gun at Chloe, who flees. Soon, she arrives at the hospital and sees a sign saying, "The end is here." On TV, the news confirms that people have disappeared all over the country and chaos is spreading quickly. The hospital is packed with desperate people looking for their loved ones, and Chloe can't even get close to the entrance. She decides to go around and breaks a glass door to enter hidden. Dodging the dozens of people in the hallways, she gets to the newborn ward and discovers that all the babies have disappeared. While checking the rooms, a mother appears and tells her that children of all ages have vanished, not only in the United States, but in the entire world. Back on Rayford's plane, he notices another plane on the same flight path and tries to contact the pilot, but no one answers. It is discovered that the other plane is without both pilots, but still has some passengers. Hattie runs to warn the passengers to put on their seatbelts while Rayford tries to divert his plane, tilting it just enough. The accident is avoided, but the wing of Rayford's plane still hits the other plane as it leaves the path. Cameron looks out the window and sees the other plane catching fire and falling. One of the passengers takes advantage of the distraction to go through the Muslim man's bag, thinking he might find the bomb that caused all this, but only finds an electric toothbrush. Another passenger comments that humanity doesn't have the technology to do something like this and suggests that the disappeared people were abducted by aliens. Minutes later, the passengers call Hattie to show her something strange on the plane's wing. Hattie asks Cameron to take a picture and take it to Rayford, who analyzes the image and realizes that the wing is holding on by a thread, which will make the landing very difficult. The autopilot is not working and Rayford can't leave the cockpit, so he tells Cameron to check if something is leaking from the wing. Cameron does the check and confirms the plane is losing fuel. Another passenger notices this and panics, while a woman despairs, saying she wants to go back to the place where her son disappeared. Suddenly, the wing catches fire and the plane starts to shake, increasing the panic even more. Hattie and Cameron remind everyone that it's important to remain calm to avoid making the situation worse. Afterwards, Cameron updates Rayford. He explains that he can't do anything other than try to get to New York before the fuel runs out. Eventually, the fire goes out by itself, and because of the amount of fuel lost, they will have to start descending earlier than expected. When Chloe finally arrives in her neighborhood, she finds several people crying for their disappeared loved ones. She runs home and is devastated to find it empty. Her mom's jewelry is in the bathroom, and the phone has only one voicemail message with static. Upon finding Irene's Bible, Chloe throws it angrily out the window. Next, she goes to the town pastor, who tells her that this is the rapture and that the people who disappeared have gone to heaven. He explains that he is there because, despite having spent years preaching, he never truly believed in the words he was saying. God took all the children and the faithful to protect them from the dark times that are to come. This only makes Chloe even more irritated, and she yells at the pastor before leaving. On the plane, Rayford goes through his co-pilot's things and finds a watch with the inscription John 3:16. It's a biblical passage that says whoever believes in God will have eternal life. Hattie also brings the other flight attendants' belongings, and they find a notebook with notes about Bible studies. Rayford concludes that all of this is the rapture and tells Hattie that his wife knew the whole time. Hattie finds the idea absurd and leaves furious. In the cabin, a woman freaks out, pulls out a gun, and demands that everyone tell the truth. She thinks they were sent by her husband to kidnap her daughter. While Cameron tries to calm her, the addicted passenger says that she studied in a religious school. She says that this event matches the description of the rapture exactly. Because of this, she believes the disappeared went to heaven. The mother, desperate, says she can't live without her daughter and thinks about giving up. Then, Cameron shares stories about his relationship with his mother until he manages to convince her to give up the idea and to take her gun. Moments later, Rayford finally gets a response on the radio and discovers that the disappearances happened all over the world. The airport is full of crashed planes, making a landing impossible, so he will have to head inland. Before Rayford can question this order, the radio stops working again. As Cameron is a reporter, he has a satellite phone, and Rayford asks him to call Chloe. However, Cameron says he's been trying all day without success. Upon showing the sad note that Chloe left in the ticket envelope, Rayford confesses that he wants to apologize. He admits that the failure of the marriage was never Irene's fault, but his for always pulling away when she talked about God. Meanwhile, Chloe, depressed, climbs to the top of a bridge. After a few seconds looking at the landscape, she apologizes to her mom for how she treated her earlier. When she is about to jump, Cameron's call finally reaches her phone, and she manages to talk to Rayford. They say, "I love you" to one another and agree that Irene was right. Rayford explains that he doesn't know if he will find a place to land, but before he can say anything else, the call drops. Knowing her father is alive is enough for Chloe to give up and run back to the city. On the way, she finds an abandoned bicycle and takes it to move faster. At the same time, Rayford warns the passengers that the chances of survival are low and asks that everyone start to pray. As the plane starts to descend, Chloe arrives at a construction site and climbs onto a truck to clear the area, pushing all the objects away. She tries to call Cameron, and luckily, the signal returns, so she manages to warn her dad that she found a place for him to land. The plane's navigation system isn't working, so Cameron asks Chloe to open the compass app and pass on the location's coordinates. Before she can say anything else, the call drops again. Cameron then puts the coordinates into the map on his cell phone, which Rayford uses as a guide to fly in the right direction. However, it's still too dark for him to find the exact spot. To make matters worse, the plane is finally running out of fuel. At that moment, Chloe manages to re-establish the connection, and Rayford asks her to arrange a strong light, since the truck isn't enough. Nearby, there are some fuel tanks, so Chloe covers them with gasoline and throws a lighter, creating a gigantic explosion. The flames are seen by Rayford, who starts to descend in that direction. Chloe jumps back into the truck and tries to get out of the way, but she is so distracted by the fire that she ends up crashing. The plane hits some cables as it descends, but this only causes some tremors. Soon, it reaches the ground and tilts because the back wheels didn't come out. The tail and one of the wings are dragged across the ground, but Rayford manages to get the plane to stabilize, and the wing lifts at the last second to avoid hitting Chloe in the truck. The plane slides for a few more kilometers, hitting several things along the way. It looks like it's going to collide with a huge fuel tank. But luckily, the plane stops before the worst can happen, and everyone is safe. While the fire Chloe started explodes again, Hattie releases the inflatable slide so that everyone can finally get off the plane. Chloe runs to hug Cameron and Rayford, who admits he never should have left. She hands him her and her mother's wedding rings before they all turn to look at the city in the distance, observing the fires. Cameron says it's the end of the world, but Chloe believes it's just the beginning. Ending like this, Left Behind, a science fiction and thriller film from 2014. And I'll wait for you in the next video.